As time goes on, Epic Games Store is snatching a lot of the upcoming major releases of the Western gaming market. I think this is at the point where I should put my rage aside and think of the situation as objective as possible. I need to think of the possibility of Epic Games Store taking over the PC digital distribution. Honestly, it is absolutely possible. I can even say that there could be a time where I prefer Epic Games Store over Steam. It may not be now, but, well, let me explain the details. But before we get to the news, I want to say huge thanks to everyone for liking and sharing my videos, subscribing and following me on social media, and for supporting me on Patreon, PayPal, and many other means, links down below. Also, huge thanks to my new patrons, Rejay, Ray, Foxius Hounds, and Jack of Tears. You guys are fantastic. The next game that is confirmed to be snatched by Epic Games Store as its exclusive is the widely anticipated first-person shooter from Obsidian, The Outer Worlds, which caused a lot of uproar amongst the fans. There's also Remedy's next game, Control, which will also be a time exclusive. The three games that make my head scratch the most was the release of all three modern Quantic Dream games on Epic Games Store, which includes Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and Detroit Become Human. These games used to be PS4 exclusives, and now they aren't PS4 exclusives. This and many more games are being snatched by Epic's exclusivity deal on Epic Games Store, causing a console war sort of thing amongst the PC gaming community and dividing pretty much everyone, especially those who are in countries that don't operate on dollars or euros. The Outer Worlds in particular was really scummy for advertising the game to be on Steam during the announcement and pulling back from everyone in the last minute. I mean, they will release it on Steam eventually, just not at the same time as the consoles, somehow providing a good argument to buy the game in the consoles instead. But then again, Metro Exodus for me was $78. What the hell is wrong with you, Sony? With all of these games being taken over by Epic Games, a lot of consumers are outraged by this prospect, but it isn't to say that Epic Games Store can't win the consumers. Can Epic Games truly take over the PC digital distribution platform and win the consumers being a platform that they prefer over Steam? Not now. Definitely not now, but maybe in the future. I've already discussed the problems on Epic Games Store multiple times on this channel, and I don't think I have to harp on it too much again here. The platform is bare bones and lacking so many great features that Steam has, like regional pricing, which allows me to buy games cheaper because I'm in a country with terrible economy. To be fair to Epic, they are working on it, but at this very moment, it's still very expensive for me. Epic Games Store needs to be pro-consumer before it can actually be loved by the consumers and the developers. However, at this state, it's really not loved by the consumers. And I can't exactly blame them after the exclusivity deals and the spyware allegations. But still, there are so many people out there who have faith that Epic Games Store will change the game. The most common counter-argument for this, and I've heard this coming from veteran developers who are in the industry as well, is that Steam also suffered the same thing when it was first released. If you want to run games made by Valve, you need to have Steam running as well. And people really don't like it. It's not a bad counter-argument, they do have a point there. People used to really not like Steam when it was first launched, but look where we are now. Steam is loved by many because it's convenient and easy to use. The argument here is that it takes time for Epic Games Store to be as good and loved by many as Steam, but this argument also has a couple of problems. The first problem is, it only makes Epic Games Store look worse in comparison. They have all the time, money, and resources to be as good as Steam. It's from Epic Games, for God's sake. They're the guys who made Fortnite and influenced so many children to the point where it's starting to turn religious at this point, and yet they released their entire platform bare bones and featureless, which is not really that friendly for the consumers. The second problem here is that when Steam was first released and hated by many, there aren't really a lot of ways for gamers to buy PC games online. I mean, sure, they can buy these games and download them directly from their websites. Sure, there's this thing called physical copies. Wow, I feel really old right now. But the process of buying games back then just isn't as simple as it is right now. But in current year, Epic Games Store has to compete with Steam, ironically, and many other digital distribution platforms in order to win the consumers. It's not about having the best games because Steam can also have the best games. The game is about winning the consumers. Back then, Steam wins by default because it's the only digital distribution platform that allows consumers to buy games easily. I mean, sure, you got direct to drive, games for Windows Live. Point is, Steam has little to no competition back then, or at least competitions that are good, which is why consumers chose Steam. But in current year, where it's more relevant, people have a lot more choice. People have more choices on what gaming store they would go to and which one that would be successful. It's up to these stores to provide pro-consumer features so that they can win them, something that Epic only decided to do weeks after its launch rather than before its launch. This corresponds with what the Epic CEO Tim Sweeney said: developers will decide who wins the game store wars and not consumers. Yes, I know, just hold on for a bit here. Let's hear what he has to say on this matter. He said that Epic Games will win the battle for the best digital storefront based on its relationship with developers and not the consumers. I think you should hold off to your horses for a bit before immediately declaring victory. That's really bold for you to just declare that you're going to win the store war. But we'll see, Tim. Maybe my perception is narrow and I'm not looking at the future. According to Sweeney, consumers already have the best experience they're going to have using those kinds of platforms. So having a better selection of games will be more important for drawing in new customers. Oh, so that's why you force games to be exclusives for a year, so that you can force the store to have the best selection of games for the consumers before Steam takes your place. You're basically suggesting that Steam has the best selection of games because you robbed them away from that right. It's quite scummy and frankly a very cowardly move to say that it's the products that made the store and not the consumers when you deliberately snatched the games away from the other store who should have sold them at the time of release. It's like if Plankton brainwashes SpongeBob and Mr. Krab to forget how to make a Krabby Patty, then release the Krabby Patty in Chum Bucket before the two finally remembers how to make one after a year of recovery. Here's another mind-boggling logic. Since digital storefronts have been trying to appeal to the consumers through user experience for so long, there's very little left to improve in that area. Because you're talking about Steam, and even Steam has a lot of improvements that need to be made in their user experience. How are you going to win over Steam on the user experience if your user experience is worse than Steam? Please, Epic CEO, explain this to me. Epic's user experience is a joke, but them taking over big Western game developers and forcing their games to be exclusives on their platform is not a joke. This is something that you consumers need to take seriously because your favorite Western games, especially from indie developers, can be an Epic Game Store exclusive. I haven't heard of any Japanese game developers or publishers going to Epic though, which is great. Please stay on Steam, at least until Epic Store can figure out in how to be as good as Steam. It's a shame that the two games that I'm interested in, which are Control and The Outer Worlds, will be coming to Epic Game Store, a store that is just inferior in every way in terms of features compared to Steam. But aside from all of that, here's also a little bit of news. Metro Exodus sells more than Last Light on Epic Game Store. Apparently it sold 2.5 times more than the Steam sales of the previous game Metro Last Light. Maybe you need to consider the fact that Metro Exodus has a lot more marketing compared to Last Light. Also, it was Epic who said this and not any of the developers or publishers, so until any of them come out and say Metro Exodus sells really damn well, I'm pressing X for doubt on that one. Maybe there's even a non-disclosure agreement on the contract telling them, hey, please don't report the sales figure until we say so. But still, there is something that at least deserves some concern here. Epic says that Metro Exodus selling 2.5 times more than Last Light is a sign that the audiences care more about picking great games and not a specific storefront, which also highlights Sweeney's previous point of developers being the deciding factor of who will win the store war rather than consumers. Maybe my perception is indeed pretty narrow. I mean, we've had games being really damn successful without the need of Steam before. Steam is ultimately just a store. It's a place where the audiences can buy your games. Steam takes 30% cut, which is still ridiculous, and Epic only takes 12%, which is very beneficial for the developers and publishers. On the other hand, Steam has more pro-consumer features compared to Epic, which might justify the price cut, but for indie games, come on, Steam. But again, maybe my perception is just too narrow. Maybe I'm not really seeing the future. A lot of the things that I say regarding Epic Games could be proven wrong in the future. I don't dismiss the possibility that Epic Game Store could be a store that dominates the PC gaming market and completely beat Steam by being pro-consumer. It could have a lot of the basic features that Steam has, and consumers would need to think twice in what platforms that they want to use. And this brings me to Valve. Valve For the love of God, 30% is way too much. There are tons of indie game devs who are struggling to make money on Steam and having their games to be noticed by people, but you only made it worse by cutting so much of their revenue. Steam only needs to make one move to win over Epic Games Store, and that is to reduce the 30% cut, at least for indie game developers. Make it more friendly for indie game developers so that they can earn more money and make a living. The AAA game devs and publishers, they can handle themselves just fine. They have spent tons in marketing. They should be just fine on Epic. It's the indie games that need your help, Valve. Just reduce that 30% to 20%, 12%, or maybe even 10%, and you're good to go. Steam will invite more indie devs to be on the platform, and Epic has nothing really. Sure, they have some of the AAA game developers in there, but indie game developers would flock back to Steam if they have a more promising cut. It's a win-win for both developers and consumers. To sum this up, I feel like a lot of my judgments on Epic Games Store, while perfectly warranted today, are going to change in the future. I don't dismiss the possibility that Epic Games Store would be amazing for the consumers in the future. If they are amazing, then I was wrong and I was narrow-minded. But still, that doesn't dismiss the fact that it's not good right now, and it needs a lot of improvements before it can be really damn good. Valve and Steam also need a lot of improvement on their side so that developers and publishers are more inclined to stay on that platform. For all of you consumers who prefer to have their games on a more consumer-friendly platform, you need to be prepared with the prospect that some of your favorite Western games are going to be on Epic Games Store. For those who are fans of Japanese games on PC, you should be fine for now, especially when Tim Sweeney said that they're not interested in the porn business. As for me, well, I review games on this channel, games that I am interested in. I reviewed Metro Exodus, and I will review The Outer Worlds, and even Control in the future. I make the purchase on these games, so you don't have to. Metro Exodus was really good. I love the game, but would I tell you guys to immediately go to Epic Games Store to buy it? Not really. I said in my review that you can buy it there just fine now, but there's really nothing wrong with waiting for the game to be released on Steam next year, or buy it in the consoles if you're that desperate. When it is on Steam though, definitely buy it. It's really good, and I feel like this judgment would apply to pretty much any other games that are going to be released on Epic. When they're good, there's nothing wrong with waiting for the Steam release. When they're bad, well, nothing of value is lost. Either way, Epic taking over games and turning them to exclusives isn't the end of the world. The benefit of waiting for these games to be released on Steam is that you can know early on if the game is garbage or not. That, and you can spend your time and money much better elsewhere, like finishing a game that you haven't finished, or watching that anime that has been on your backlog for a while. Just look at the positives and appreciate the beauty of the world. Epic still sucks, by the way.